Charles Moscowitz. Welcome to the program. I'm doing this, Karen, now every day at 12 noon, and again come back at 2 o'clock and do some more. So I guess given the shutdown and all, we can now really develop this. And so this is how I spend a portion of my day. Uh, Karen, you have an interesting website, KarenKataline.com.
Actually, it's Karen Kataline, but that's okay.
Thank you.
My first name has already become a pejorative punchline, so what the heck?
Well, let's talk about that. I mean, what's
Okay.
going, you've got some interesting views here. You talk about being Jewish and conservative.
Yes.
And
Gee,
so
I thought you might ask me about that. I'm glad you knew because my last name I came by marriage, so a lot of people don't know. And when I make comments that are not politically correct, which is frequent, I am apt to be called anti-Semitic, and boy, are they surprised. Now, there are anti-Semitic Jews, but I'm not one of them. So
no,
I'm very proud to be a Jew, and it's amazing what knee-jerk people there are out there claiming that they're anti-bigotry when really they're the bigots.
well, I mean, I've had the same thing happen to me, and I think that the term anti-Semitism has come to be expanded to include anybody that's not on the left, actually.
And they're the anti-Semites for the most part. I mean,
ironically,
our history has had Jew hatred for thousands of years, as you well know. But right now in history, the Jew haters are mostly on the left, and then they employ the terms anti-Semitism when it suits them. When they want to defend George Soros, a self-hating anti-Semitic Jew, they say it's anti-Semitic to criticize him. But yet they can have Ilhan Omar and AOC and all of that in their Congress, and they don't have the guts to even sanction them in any way. The hypocrisy is breathtaking.
Karen, how do you, and speaking here as a fellow member of the tribe, so to speak,
MOT.
MOT, there we go. How has it been for you as an open and outspoken conservative in your own community, at your synagogue, among your family?
Yeah.
I don't mean to put you on the spot, but
No. I don't mind at all. Like most things, I don't fit the mold, and that's why I'm a Jewish female social worker, actress, conservative who used to live in New York. So I always march to my own drummer. My parents are deceased. I came from a mixed marriage. My father was a Republican. My mother was a Democrat. They were both Jews. And I never was a liberal. I just never was. So I can't be called a neocon because I was never a Democrat. And so I wrote a book, and I don't have to talk about this per se, but I wrote a book about my experiences in child beauty pageants as a kid. And it was called Fat Lash, Food Police, and the Fear of Thin. And I had your typical Jewish stage mother on steroids. Now, not all Jewish mothers are stage mothers, but when they are, oh my. And where was I going with this? So independence, freedom has always been important to me. And when I realized how passionate I am about personal liberty and personal responsibility, I realized that the book I wrote in 2012 made a lot of sense because my mother kind of lived through me. We are the ones who originated, the woman that wrote the foreword to my book. I have an MSW from Columbia. There's another one. You'd think I'd be a liberal, right? Mm-hmm. And we called it Princess by Proxy. And when parents live through their children, really the child isn't there. They don't exist. So finding your independence and your personal responsibility and find out who you really are, apart from what someone is has a vested interest in having you be, is something that was important to me since childhood. So now, as I see how passionate I am about liberty, I realize that it has everything to do with how I grew up and the struggles that I had as a kid. One day, if I ever had the time, which I don't right now, I'd love to write a mental health type book and find out what is it that attracts people to conservatism and to individual freedom and liberty, and who appreciate the brilliance of our Constitution that was designed to protect those freedoms as God-given, as you well know. So it's interesting to me. If people care more about virtue signaling and being belonging to the group and group think, and there's a lot of narcissism to the left, they're apt to be Democrats. They care about appearances. They care about what looks good, not what is good. And those are all things I noticed early on in my life.
Karen, so what you're describing and the values that you embraced early on and continue are certainly conservative values that most Jews embrace, at least most Jews I know.
Yeah.
And yet, they're all at some varying degrees on the left. They certainly all, as far as I'm in my circles, 90%, I'd say, vote Democrat by a matter of almost for tribal reasons, not because they're thinking about it.
Yes.
And they're all, I mean, when I noted to people that I had voted in the last election for Donald Trump, my mother stopped speaking to me for a while. My brother stopped speaking to me for a while. People, my synagogue, I eventually had to leave the synagogue.
Really?
I mean, I was a member of 2 synagogues. One of them, I couldn't go there anymore. It was so bad.
Really? I know the feeling.
And there were some other things that happened that I don't want to get into, and even recently, we went to a family event, and I had a cousin who lives near me, and he wouldn't get in the car he didn't go because of that. He just didn't want to be near me. And I don't think that my situation is atypical here. So my question to you, speaking as one Jewish person to another, is why are they so liberal? What are they so, why are they so into this? I mean, what is it about?
I get that question from Christian conservatives all the time. If I had a nickel for every time people ask me, why are Jews so liberal? I'd be really, I don't know, rich. Yeah. And I tell them it's a 2-hour conversation, and even then it won't make total sense. I'm fond of the quote by Rabbi Daniel Lapin, who said that the very fact that 78% of Jews vote Democrat is proof positive that the myth of Jewish higher intelligence is purely a myth.
Mm-hmm. Oh, no, and, I don't know.
I don't know how it's going to be this time around, because we are on the precipice. Actually, it's probably not going to change that all.
No, I don't expect that it will. I mean, that's the sad part of this.
Yes, and what they don't understand, I've been pretty frustrated and aggravated at the Jewish community. Now, I'm in Colorado now. Where are you?
I'm in Boston.
Oh, Boston. That's right. I should know that. Well, even more so in Boston. But yeah. I never knew that Jews were so liberal till I moved to New York City. I didn't know that, and I wasn't all that political. I mean, I moved there when I was 21, but still, I had no idea that being Jewish was synonymous with being Democrat. But what was I going to say? So part of what it is, there's a lot of things. Jews don't trust Christians, for one thing. And I had that same chip on my shoulder for a long time, for reasons I won't go into. And I think most Jews do, because we grew up with this prejudice that said that the only reason Christians support the state of Israel is because they want us all to go there, and then we'll all be converted and the rest will die.
Right.
And I had a small epiphany when I realized that it's not up to Christians to keep Jews Jewish. It's up to Jews to keep Jews Jewish. And as long as they're not putting a gun to my head or a sword to my throat, as another religion still does today, then, have at it. You want to try and convert me? Fine. I've had people trying to convert me for 40 years. It hasn't worked yet. So I have a lot in common with my Christian friends because they're conservative. And if we get into a theological discussion, which I don't think is that apropos right now, because Jews need all the friends they can get, then I'm happy to have that conversation. But American Christians, for the most part, do support the state of Israel. Another thing is that Jews have been in love with utopian ideology. We're taught tikkun olam, heal the world, but we don't realize it's heal the world under God, not you get to be God and heal the world and tell people how to behave. There's just a lot. And the problem is you can't even talk to the liberals or even most of the conservative Jews in the conservative synagogue, because they were already very liberal. So the only chance we have is with the Orthodox. I'm not super observant. In fact, I'm not really observant at all. I live in a very Christian community. I'm 100% Jewish, don't want to be anything else. But it bothered me tremendously when Jews did not stand up, when their rights were being taken away, when they were being told to shut down discriminatively, different than restaurants and bars and what have you. And they couldn't see, this is what I wanted to say, and then I'll shut up because, I am verbose. They could not see that the early stages of tyranny, if there were ever a group of people that ought to be conscious of the early stages of tyranny, it should be the Jews. And instead, they're rolling over again. And they don't realize that this same bigotry narrative, racism narrative, right around the corner, these so-called Palestinians are waiting in the wings to use it. They already have been against Jews in America and Israel. They've been converting people out of prisons into the so-called pro-Palestinian cause. And this is all working together in a very rather sinister way. This is, I have a piece that I just wrote called Black and White Thinking. It's not even out yet. It's not about race. It's about all good or all bad thinking. Anybody who advances your agenda is all good and they're beyond reproach and you can't criticize them. And anybody who is on your list as being against your agenda is irredeemable, as Hillary said, irredeemable. So that kind of thinking is what's behind it, and it's purely political. What bothers me is that the Jews are not standing up. They need to stand with Christians for religious freedom and the First Amendment.
There you go. They don't realize, or maybe they do realize, that a lot of the movements, and we can name a few names like Black Lives Matter and the Antifa and other movements that are really the shock troops for the Democratic Party on the street, that they have made common cause with anti-Israel movements and anti-Jewish movements.
Yes.
And that the reason they have is because they're anti-Israel for the same reason that they're anti-America. They don't like a free, independent, democratic-based system where you have the free market and you have individual rights.
Mm-hmm.
They want to tear that down. And I don't think that this is necessarily a conscious thing, but that's at the core, the belief system that's going on here. And, you mentioned tikkun olam. Greatly misinterpreted by Jews over time, yes, to mean communism. It's instead of believing, the concept is to know God, as you say, to look at the Torah as a guide for your life, and thus by doing so be an example to others and improve the world, and to do charitable deeds and to commit mitzvah, which is not just charity but observance. It's not to conquer other people. It's not to use human force. It's not they put it in a secular context, and by doing so they bring great discredit to Judaism. And I read a book a while back. I interviewed the author, that being Benjamin Ginsberg. The book is The Fatal Embrace. He was a professor at Johns Hopkins, and his theory is that the Jews historically in the diaspora, starting in the Middle Ages and right up till today, there would be a prince or a king or a duke that would be friendly to them, and they would therefore become a part of the court, and they would help that prince in every way they could, and they would promote him. And then if he dies, a new guy comes along who hates the Jews, and then they get kicked out. But that's what Benjamin Ginsberg calls the fatal embrace. But over time, it's created a certain mentality, a certain psychology that that we tend to embrace big power, big government, because it protects us. We think if
Or
we
so we think.
yeah, and it
And we
feeds into
never get
this.
protected.
Of
Neither
course
do
not.
the
That's the fatal
blacks.
embrace, because then a bad
The
guy comes
blacks
along and it
protected.
all.
Yes, they're not protected at all. They
Oh
are
no, no, not
harmed
at all.
irreparably. It's the opposite of everything they say. We
Exactly, and it
get it.
completely runs contrary to the Jewish understanding, which is that rights come from God, not from the state. You know
Right,
that we're answerable to a higher authority, like the old Hebrew national commercial used to say, right?
right,
You know,
right.
we're not answerable to the king. You know, we derive our moral and ethical code from God and from the
And
Torah.
what you're saying is one of the very reasons that socialists and communists find people of faith, of all faiths, such a threat to their ideology, because they want to be God in their own universe and in yours too. That's why.
Yes, but so many Jews have drunk the Kool-Aid, and back then in the communist times and right up till today, and there is this fatal attraction toward utopianism and messianism that has been
Yes.
very damaging. We have to
And
let God take care of that.
victim mentality too. And it's funny when non-Jews ask me about, well, why aren't Jews conservative? The stereotype, and some of it is true, they tend to be very successful, they make a lot of money, so why would they ever be liberals? And I say, well, as long as Democrats can succeed in claiming and getting people to believe that they're the party of the little guy, which nothing could be further from the truth, Jews are going to be attracted to that, because no matter how much money a Jew makes, he doesn't usually feel a part of the establishment. He still feels like the underdog. And some of that is based in reality. Some of that
Sure.
is true. We are the underdog in the sense that we are a minority. But we don't have the same sort of victim mentality as, say, the Black community does. Our victimhood comes from keeping our heads down and trying to make sure that, if we're unobtrusive, people won't mess with us.
No, and I think that it's more than an embrace of some kind of a fuzzy idea that allegedly helps the minority, the downtrodden. Uh, but it's also this craving for acceptance. I mean, the liberal
Yes.
elite is always in the high ground of the culture, of the
Yes.
institutions, of the
Oh, that's
media,
such a good point.
right? They get the award. You know, if you're a liberal and you bow and you genuflect a little to the left, you
Yes.
get the awards. You get
Yeah.
mentioned favorably. You get people start sending you accolades, and if you don't do it, then you get severely punished. So I think that
Right.
there is a certain desire out of a
Desire for
craving of
recognition
safety.
and to belong.
Yeah, and it comes from this deep-seated insecurity about safety, and
Yes.
and one that is rightfully based in the diaspora,
Yeah.
to uh, to try to get along and to try to ingratiate yourself, and
Yeah.
it's very unflattering, and it's hard. I mean, I get it. You know, I certainly get it in my own life that it's not easy to buck that establishment, but they're willing to sacrifice a lot. I think almost subconsciously to make that happen, to feel like they're part of it, and it does become something that your business depends on it. Your standing in the community depends on it. So yeah,
Yeah, but
there's a
it's very superficial. As now, that doesn't mean that I distrust every non-Jew. I am not that way. The irony is the people that do trust the establishment don't trust the establishment. I mean, they try to belong to a group that they're not sure they trust, which
right.
is ironic. But it's a funny thing. Jews, I think. Oh, I know what I was going to say. I don't know. I forgot.
Hey,
There's so
no,
many things. I mean, it's such a fascinating conversation because my politics led me more towards my Judaism theologically, which for some people is the reverse.
no. I mean,
Because
my experience is similar.
really,
Oh, sure. And
uh,
I also was led to conservatism when I filled out my first tax return. I
what a
mean, I'm like,
stereotype.
As a self-employed businessman, I was happy and proud to go file
Yeah.
my taxes. And I remember showing up at H&R Block, and I was like, I looked at the amount I would owe, and I'm like, well, that is a lot of money, but I can do that. And she's like, oh, no, no, we're not done yet. Let's wait for the Social Security, FICA, blah, 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 blah. By the time it was
Yeah.
over, that bill was so high that I almost was, I felt catatonic. And,
Wow.
that was money that I would have otherwise invested back in the business to grow it. Now I couldn't do that. So it made me question who is getting this money, why, and what is going on here. It seems very regressive. And that led me down the road toward becoming conservative. The other thing that led me down the road was I realized that I believed in God.
Mm, that's a biggie.
It is.
Because I'll tell you, I love talking about God and Judaism and all that because I don't get a chance to do it all that much. And I had another small epiphany not that long ago in which, because it all has to feel good today, which of course is the precursor to things feeling really bad. And that's the road we're on now. But if everything has to feel good and everybody's a little snowflake, they'll tell you when you study Torah with somebody, I was asking about the fear of God. And somebody was actually Chabad. I mean, it was a pretty, orthodox organization. The first thing she said, she wasn't really a teacher. Oh, it doesn't really mean that. People think it's bad. It's not really bad. It doesn't really mean that. It means, I don't know what she said. But I thought about it a minute and I thought, fearing God is a really good thing.
Right.
And why water it down? You don't water it down. If you fear God and you have you are in awe of the power of God, you will have less fear of man. So why is that not a good thing? We want to be accountable on Yom Kippur. We want to be judged, hopefully to the good, but we want to be judged because that means not only does someone care about us, but if we're accountable, as I wrote again in this piece, if you're robbed of your accountability, you can never be free because somebody's taking responsibility for you. But if you have accountability, you should embrace it because that means you're a grown adult and you get to be responsible for your actions. That's an important thing.
Yeah. And this whole idea of this concept of love in relation to God is kind of an infantilization of the whole concept. There's right and wrong. You judge your life based upon those standards, and they exist outside of you and what you would like it to be. They're
I'm
very
okay
quite
with
real.
the idea God loves you. I mean, I had
Sure.
a teacher say to me, "We're the God loves you people." And I said, "Really? I thought it was the Jesus loves you people." And then she said, "No, we came up with that." Really? Well, I didn't know that. All I ever heard, I mean, there's so many paradoxes when you start studying it.
Oh yeah,
You know,
absolutely.
can I throw one out at you?
Please,
Well,
please.
tell me because it's one that I have in the back pocket that I don't say very often. It's ironic to me from a mental health perspective that our book is always looked upon as harsh judging, right? It's such a harshly God, those Jews, they believe in a harsh judgmental God. And Jesus is such a loving power. Now, I don't have these theological conversations because this, with my Christian friends that much. Occasionally I do. And I say, vive la différence. I'm not trying to change you. I'd rather you not try and change me. As long as you don't try to change me at the point of a gun, we're fine. But the truth of the matter is that Christianity is love, 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 and I'll forgive you, forgive you, forgive you, and all is love, love, love. And in practice, the history of the people are exact reverse. In Judaism, we have a harsh book, and yet we made up for it by being overly kind. And I don't say that as a good thing. We didn't get rid of Amalek when we should have. We didn't get tough when we should have. We're not getting tough now when we should, right? The Christians have a very bloody history, a very intolerant history, particularly against Jews. That's a long time ago now. But let's face it, they have a pretty ugly history, and yet their book says love, love, love. So the balance and the kind of struggle between, as we know, kindness and justice is an ageless struggle. There has to be kindness and there has to be justice and there has to be a tempered combination of both. Otherwise, you get these two extremes.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the idea of love your neighbor as yourself, which is in the Torah and was articulated by both Jesus and by Hillel, is something that is misinterpreted today by both Jews and Christians. It doesn't mean literally love your neighbor like as a teenager, having a crush. It means you can despise your neighbor and fear your neighbor and hate your neighbor, but the love is that you recognize that your neighbor has rights, and that for you to have rights, you have to recognize your neighbor's rights. Because if you don't recognize your neighbor's rights, you've abrogated your rights. Doesn't mean you can't compete and fight and hate each other. It's not. This modern idea of love is something that's not. It's not there. I don't think that's what Jesus had in mind either. By the way, it's more like, it's creating an order of society where we don't have to love each other, but we have to respect each other's God-given rights as images of God. So
I love the idea that in order to preserve our freedom, we first have to make sure that we respect other people's freedom.
Exactly.
And the First Amendment is not for the things you like to hear. It's for the things you don't like to hear. The First Amendment is, if you can tolerate what someone says that you cannot stand, then you're protecting your own rights too. And that is not slowly, but rapidly being robbed of us as we speak. It's
Absolutely
deadly dangerous. It is a direct attack on this country. And to the extent that people don't see that it's a direct attack, we're going to lose it. God forbid we don't. But people
you're
stand
right.
up.
You put your finger right on it, Karen. I mean, it's an informal, this whole business of political correctness and language control, this is an informal tyranny. You have to be able to hear things that you may not agree with in the public sphere and debate them.
And it started out by demonizing the people they disagree with, to the point where people claimed that it was too upsetting for them to hear something that they didn't agree with. So it's a combination of infantilization and demonization. If you combine the two of those, you've got a very faulty justification for shutting people down that you don't like. And what does that do? It makes a one-party country. That's what it does.
Yeah, and unfortunately, the people who are so filled with the love ideology are doing just that. They're shutting down the country. Unfortunately, that includes some pretty prominent Jewish groups like the ADL. I'm not going to, mince words here. They want to censor any opinion that they don't like, that's not on the left. They want to call it anti-Semitism.
Leftist first and Jewish maybe, I don't know, 12th.
That's right. And I'm not saying there isn't anti-Semitism, and I applaud the fact that they do also identify that. I mean, we should. But let's not broaden that net to include anyone that doesn't agree with the left. Since when is the left Jewish anyways?
They're Jewish liberals, and notice they are the least Jewish of anyone.
Oh, yeah, exactly. And although there is some pretty strong. That is always
the truth. They're the loudest, and they're the least Jewish, and yet they're the most pointed to as Jews. The Orthodox Jews, whom I wish would be stronger, are very quiet about their conservatism, if they're conservative at all, because they think it's unseemly. Well, the liberals have no such concern about being unseemly.
Yeah, and unfortunately, they've captured the high ground in Jewish culture and in Jewish institutions and Jewish life. And it's something that, in my own small way, I'm trying to expose and combat. I know you are too, Karen. And so, Karen, talk a little bit about your website, KarenKataline.com. What do you have going on there?
Well, there's more activity going on there than ever before, because I'm putting out not only short little blogs, but long articles. So I have 2 separate places now. That's kind of new. Which shows that there are full articles and op-eds. There's a whole archive. I do a podcast like you, a live call-in talk radio show on Fridays, 2 p.m. So you can still do Shabbos and see my show. And then I go out and I light my candles. So, but it's called Spouting Off. And all you have to do to listen live, and I would love to get listeners and callers from your audience. If they want to, they can argue with me. You know how it is. It's in our genes. We love to argue.
Of course. You never have to.
So it's Spouting Off, 2 p.m. Eastern. All you got to do is go to KarenKataline.com. Karen spelled the normal way. Kataline spelled KATALINE.com. And you just click on the little link there that says listen. And it'll take you to a play button. And it'll give you all the call-in numbers and everything. And you can call in and listen.
You know, I'm looking at the site right now. It's excellent. You've got Listen Live. You've got a good link to your podcast. You also have some tremendous blog sites, articles. I do urge my viewers and listeners to check this out. It's great. And Karen, I hope to KarenKataline.com. Again, that's the site. Hope to have you back. We should do some regular programming.
Well, I would love that. It's good to talk to you. And it's always good to find a fellow Jewish conservative. As we like to say, we don't proselytize our religion, but we do like to proselytize our politics.
You bet.
You are not alone.
Thank you. I know we really need to get together. We should bring more people in, and really, if we could peel off a couple of percentage points, we could change the world.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Take care. All right, Karen. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.